Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about using your personal experience to create a brand that can change our cultural perceptions around the subject. I'm happy to welcome today Kerry Abner, who is the founder of Manhattan Gray, a hair care line specifically for people with gray hair. And we're going to talk about how he got to the point of launching this product, but also stigmas around gray hair and how the perception is shifting. So, welcome, Kerry.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you very much.
So, let's talk about first where you grew up and how it shaped your ideas about the career you wanted to have.
Yeah, so I'm a military brat, you know what I mean? So I was born in Bronx, New York, but shortly after that, my father was in the military, joined the military, and we ended up living in England and Japan, and then came back stateside and lived down in Florida for a while, in the Panhandle. Then right before that, I ended up going, down to Tampa for school, and then which has been a whirlwind ever since. So a little bit of a cluster of a lot of different things, and how that shaped my perception on the career I wanted to pursue. More so, I just have a lens of thinking broadly, and I knew I wanted to be creative. I think creativity gave me the biggest opportunity to build versus, kind of just being somebody who just followed one beaten path. I kind of wanted to explore and have big ideas and mesh with different cultures, and I think marketing kind of gave me the biggest opportunity to kind of mix in my experience with some sort of professional direction.
So, tell us about your first job and the how it set you up for success later.
My first job, my first ever like professional
Right.
job, or like first job. Okay, my first ever professional job was at a place called it was called Crawford
Okay.
Communications at the time. But it was just my first media job. It was my first job out of college, and it was this job that was called Master Control. So I sat and watched TV. And I was like the guy who made sure that the TV didn't go to black, and I, made sure that the commercials ran and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. So it was, it was very uneventful.
Right. But I mean, one of the things you probably you will never forget is like you got to pay attention to the details.
100%, 100%.
So, what do you like most about? Let's talk about what your current role is in your 9 to 5.
My current role, I work over at the global marketing team. I'm on the global marketing team for Sony Music, so I market music, hip hop, and R&B, specifically catalog.
Okay. Okay. So, what do you like most about marketing?
It's kind of like a mixture of art and science,
Okay.
if you will. You know what I mean? I think like the creativity of it is like, what's the messaging? What's the pictures? What's the photos? What's the video? What's the story that we're telling? How do we, evoke empathy and emotional resonance so that it kind of inspires somebody to really take an action and be a part of something that we are promoting as a campaign, but then it's equally like, what's the strategy and where are these people? You know, what's the budget and how much do we spend on this channel versus this channel and why and what's the data like? So I kind of get to play in both worlds, if you will. I kind of
Yes.
get to operate, you know, use both sides of my brain.
But what's great about what you do in your 9 to 5 is that it's applicable to entrepreneurship as well. So that those skills are valuable. Like most entrepreneurs don't have possess those skills that you do. So you're coming into a space with very valuable skills that can, make or break a business.
I didn't think about it like, like that, but yeah, I think so too. I think it gives me a little bit of opportunity to do what transferable skills
Right.
wise, right? So it's like I spend all day doing marketing, making sure marketing works and push through. then equally I'm like, oh, I get to apply these same skill sets to my own projects and build something of my own. So it's not nothing that I take for granted.
Right. So did you always think you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Well, I don't think I understood the concept at the
Right.
time when I just knew that I like to build stuff.
Right.
I always like to build stuff. I like the idea of like coming up with an idea, and bringing it to life. So I think that's more that pulls on my
Right.
heartstrings versus like knowing that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. You know?
So let's talk. So what drew you to beauty, so to speak? We're going to get into it, but were you surprised that you ended up in beauty? Maybe that's the question.
Yeah, definitely. I was definitely surprised to end up in beauty because I never really sought out to be a beauty entrepreneur per se, but I understood the value of, you know, void in the marketplace, storytelling, personal experience, trends, timeliness, and I just felt like I had a good idea that hit all of those things at one time and kind of just jumped out the window after it.
Right. And I'm glad that you did. So would you consider your move into beauty a destination or a detour?
I'm gonna say a destination. I don't want to call it a detour because it's not nothing that is taking me outside of myself,
Okay.
right? I have a very specific experience with what I'm doing. I have the emotional connection to it, and I think it's one part of me that I was able to bring into a physical concept. So I want to give it the proper respect to say like this is a destination, not the final
Right.
destination, but it is a destination of the story of my life that I was able to, ideate around.
So let's talk a little bit about your personal story when it comes to gray hair.
Mm-hmm.
So you can tell us a little bit about it. When did you first notice your first gray hair?
I don't even actually remember. I just know that I was super young. I was somewhere around 19, 20, 21 when my hair started to gray. And to be honest with you, the first emotion that comes out is insecurity,
Right.
right? Because the narrative about gray hair is that, you're old, you are stressed. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It's very negative connotations about gray hair. So for me to be so young and to start seeing gray hair come, it was more so an insecurity of how do I was plucking them, I was covering it up. I think I wear hats and hoodies so much to this day based off that. So it's just been a lot of battle with the idea of embracing my gray.
Right. And I can relate because I think I know I saw my first gray hair at 11. Like
Okay.
like people were like, "You have a gray hair." So, and I colored my hair for a really long time because
Mhm.
my grandparents and my great aunts and uncles and on both sides had white hair, right? My mom didn't color. You never saw my mom's gray hair. She was not going there. So I kind of felt a little bit like maybe you don't want to show your gray hair. Like, good. It's like a bad thing. But I love the idea that the perception has changed so much that we can embrace. And I think that what you're doing is one of the ways that changes the perception of it, the way that you're marketing your brand. So, and then let's talk about how perceptions based on gender are different. I talked a little bit about my personal experience, but you said something really interesting in the pre-interview about men versus women, and so tell us a little bit about that.
You know, from what I understood, like men kind of get as I got older, I started to understand that men get a little bit more celebrated for their hair. It's almost like this distinguished maturity, secure type of conversation around gray hair. And women tend to panic a little bit more because it's ageism,
Yes.
right? It's like I'm getting older and I may appear less desirable because of age to a certain group of people. And I'm not, and that's me completely
Right.
observational.
Absolutely.
I don't, you know what I mean, just to be respectful to like what I'm actually saying. But like, yeah, I think men get a little bit more celebrated for a distinguished gray hair, salt and pepper look versus women, and I think that's kind of the too when it kind of comes to the embracing the gray conversation. Those it's more,
I think one of the things that helped is in the last, I'd say, 5 years, 7 years, that younger millennials started dyeing their hair gray for fashion. So then it
mhm.
became a little bit more seen as a trend, and it helped to elevate the conversation. But as you said, if you are a person of a certain age that's graying naturally, there, I don't know if it's fear or already, yes, ageism, and for women, invisibility. You become invisible to a lot of people when you make these choices, or you could become, there's a fear of becoming invisible. And I like the perception or the movement that's happening now that, you know, that gray does not equal old. You might be
Right,
mature, but you're not old.
right.
So we talked a little bit about this, but how do you think going gray has changed in the culture?
I think people are a little bit more receptive to going gray now. I think that you know the pandemic specifically separated all of us from our hairdressers and barbers and colorists and stuff like that. So it kind of gave us an opportunity to sit with it for a minute. I think also, you know, with the whole culture around wanting to have more visibility into what the products and in the ingredients that are in
Right.
products. I think we want to be healthier. We're a culture that wants to be a little healthier, a little bit more conscious about what we're putting on our skin, in our hair, in our bodies. So it's just like this big, pendulum swing of like we want to be more conscious about what we're doing. We're embracing our growth. So we're going to stop dyeing our hair because now we're starting to see that, the harmful chemicals that are in hair dyes are doing more damage long term versus us just embracing our gray and finding healthier options to maintain healthier gray hair. If that's
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you have the aha moment that I want to make a product?
when I went to go look for a gray hair product for myself. Like at some point, I dyed my hair one time, and I just felt so inauthentic about what I had done, and it wasn't really my thing.
Right.
And I was like, all right, well, that's not it. So now I'm gonna have to go find something that helps me maintain. You know, it, gray hair is a little bit more dry, it's a little bit more brittle, it's a little bit more flaky. It's had the mind of its own. So I was like, okay, well, how can I find better products for me? And when I couldn't find any, I think that's where the aha moment came in. It was like, well, what if I created something that I could
Right.
use for myself? And then I sold it to one person, and then it kind of just spiraled from there.
So let's talk about the process though. So because you're a marketer, you're very intentional about how you approached, um, once you'd made the decision, intentional about how you approached the marketplace and figuring out what was needed beyond your personal, beyond your personal needs. So what did you do?
What did I do?
Survey.
I mean, I just started. Yeah, I started with the survey. Yeah, yeah. I was like, I started with the survey. I just made a very small 5 to 7 question survey, asking very general questions like, what's the number one challenge you're having with maintaining your gray? What products do you use to maintain healthy gray hair? If there was a product available, what would you want it to, look like? Stuff like that. So I sent that out to people that was around me, family,
Right.
friends, and I started seeing the trend of like the same conversation happening around gray hair, dryness, and brittleness, and I think that's what really took it to the next level for me to understand what the actual challenges were.
So how did you factor in essential oils? What made you think about essential oils as part of formula?
Now, that was a friend of mine who was already into essential oils, and every time I asked her about anything, she would tell me that there was an essential oil that did this and did that, and she was very much into that space. And that was kind of like my first Google search, like what essential oils are for like hair and what do they do for
Right,
hair. And then I started to look, read about avocado oil, coconut oil, and rosemary, and frankincense and sandalwood. So I just started to read about all this stuff, and I understood that there were different essential oils that had different effects on particular aspects of the hair. And once I made a list of those, it was that list that I took to my chemist, and I was like, "Hey, I'm trying to solve for these problems on the survey. From what I understand, these are some basic essential oils and what they do. And if I could start with these two assets as far as the information and research, could I create a formula from that?"
okay. So how did you find your chemist?
Just Google. I just made a Google list and I just typed in. I understood the idea of like private
Right,
labeling, understood the idea of like white labeling. So I'm not per se in my kitchen making my formula, but I got on Google, typed in private label companies in the hair care space, made a list of about 50 of them, called all 50 of them to figure out, you know, what the minimum order was, where they were located, whether they had, you know, African American, people in the process who can help
right,
understand exactly what I'm saying. So I think textured gray hair and black people in particular, that's a special space. So I think those were some of the key things, which quickly brought down that list to a very small list. Especially when you start talking about people who understand black hair in the manufacturing space.
right. And for our audience who are not familiar with private label, there are manufacturers who create general formulas that then can be customized for
Right,
someone.
right,
So
absolutely,
what Kerry did was work with a base formula and then add the elements that he needed to solve for the problems.
right, right.
Yeah. You did have a specific product inspiration in mind that you started with that you were hoping to get something like. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, yeah. There was a. So what I do understand is
Right.
Murray's. I understood Murray's. 'Cause when I was young, that was like the hair grease of choice because we was all trying to get waves in junior high, and it was like this thick, this really thick hair grease that would hold your waves in place with our do rags on. So again, I didn't really necessarily know what I was doing at the time with
Right.
that, but I was the inspiration. I was like when the chemist started to create, they were sending me hair creams and hair oils and all these things that I had no real actual relationship with.
Right.
Once she said pomade, I was like, oh, I understand that. I know what that is. And Murray's was kind of like my North Star.
Right. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the Start Right Here podcast and leave a review. Also, you can sign up for our mailing list at thebeautyroundtable.com. So you will be on the know about all the good things coming. Right. And I love that idea that because that's relatable to the audience. Anybody that you're marketing to, if you say I wanted to take the the inspiration from a Murray's but make it a cleaner formula that works on gray hair. Right.
Yes, yes.
So people get that. People, they're like, oh, I can use that. That works. That works for men. That works for women. That works for us. How many formulas you said you sent creams and oils, and so how many iterations of formulas did you get before you landed on the right one?
Three. I had three like R&D processes. They created a formula. It was a hair cream. It had a bunch of chemicals in there that I didn't understand, so that killed it already. Because I was like, no, I need this to be clean so that I could. That's one of my marketing talking points. So I killed that. Then she sent me an oil, and then like as a guy who was using it firsthand, the oil was running down my arm, and I was like, you know, that's going to be bad for men. Men don't really want to deal with that first thing in the
Right.
morning. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Then the pomade was like the final, iteration of what she brought to me, and I knew instantly that this was the right move.
So once you had the product,
Mhm.
talk to me about how you decided to market it.
I decided to market it. One, I mean, the through line is gray hair. So originally, Manhattan Gray was going to be a men's product.
Okay.
That's what the first idea was. However, as soon as I started to like build a Shopify store, right? So I put it up on Shopify and built the store and started to market it on Facebook, started to market on Instagram. Instantly, it resonated with women as well, and they started to purchase the product. So now Manhattan Gray is a unisex
Right.
product. So not only is it a unisex product, we have two SKUs, which is a pomade and a hair oil, and then I market it through the internet because I'm a digital native.
Right.
So it was Shopify store. It was influencers. I sent the product out to influencers for them to try and create content with. Which then I use the content of the videos from the influencers to be my ad creative,
Okay.
and I put Facebook and Instagram ads behind that. So it's mostly been about the story of embracing your gray, walking in your confidence, individuality, encouraging more men and women to avoid harmful chemicals that are usually found in hair dyes. It being clean, it being a vegan option was a big, buzzword for me to help market something a little bit more sustainable. I wanted it to feel a little bit more upscale than like the traditional plastic. So Manhattan Gray products come in glass. This is actually an amber glass jar, black top. And then yeah, it was just more of like an internet thing. I started to push it out on the internet first and foremost and create content around that, and that's where it got started.
But so let's talk about a couple of things. Name Manhattan Gray. What made you
Mhm.
name the brand Manhattan Gray?
I was living in New York at the time when Manhattan Gray was conceptualized. So I was living in New Jersey, right on I think it's the Hudson. That's the Hudson River. But I was looking at the Manhattan skyline.
Okay.
So yeah. So I was in my apartment trying to figure out a name. One day I was on my way to work, standing at the bus stop and looking and it was like one of those gloomy, kind of
Yes.
gray, hazy days. And I was just always like, you know, New York is such a concrete city. Everything's gray. Everything's kind of, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It has its own vibe. So I don't know actually how it happened. It was just like an epiphany, and it was Manhattan Gray, and
Because
stuck with it.
the name is great. The name is great. It kind of gives it a cachet, but also the glass bottle. It all kind of works together to make it feel like a more upscale experience. And so, also tell us about finding influencers. When you started to market this, were great influencers already a thing?
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, I think Gray Influence was already, it was already a space. I wasn't aware of the space,
Right.
but once I went to go look for them, they were definitely readily available. It was available to me, and that's where it started. But yeah, Gray Hair Influencers was already a space that I found once I had the product available.
Right. Cool. And then we talked a little bit about before just how the just the existence of your product and your messaging influences culture, shifts culture. Can you talk to me about, the goal there?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of again, I think it goes back to like wanting to be a product that actually promotes the idea of gray hair being beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
If I can, right? Like, turn on the TV, I rarely see any people with gray hair in commercials and advertisements about beauty and about feeling your best and looking your best. It's always like cover up your gray, dye your gray, eliminate gray. I'm like, no, like why wouldn't we be a part of the conversation that is about embrace and being confident? And so when I think about shifting the culture or shifting the narrative, it was about me being in the marketing space, knowing that I've never seen nobody that looked like me in the space, which created the insecurity of gray hair being less desirable for me.
Right.
And I wanted to shift the narrative and the perspective that gray hair is something to be celebrated. And then when I think about Manhattan Gray, I think about it more of like a time company
Okay.
versus a hair product company, because gray hair is a conveyor belt. Like everybody is going to eventually,
Right.
experience gray hair, right? So my customer base is just generation.
Right. Generational and evolving because it's like a sliding scale. So the ones who maybe are my generation who are gray now are going to stay gray, right? As long as we have hair. And then we're just going to embrace more people as time goes on.
Right.
Yeah. I like that idea. So what is next for Manhattan Gray? What are you thinking you want to do next?
I would like to seek investment. I would like to, partner with some organization or people who potentially want to help raise capital for Manhattan Gray so that I could, one, expand the product line. I could do more marketing of the product. I could, buy more inventory. I just want to really take this to the next level, and I think I haven't been able to do that up until this point due to lack of
Right.
resources.
So what do you think the biggest challenge has been doing this on your own?
Cash flow, and it's just really hard to do. I mean, product companies have, like, hard costs and overhead, I got to have the inventory, and I have to have the bottles and the lids and the jars and the seals and the labels. So there's just certain things I have to, like, for it to even
Right.
exist. I got to pay for it, right? And then there's the fulfillment and making sure that it gets shipped and packaged and gets to the customer once the product is ordered. So I think, like, cash flow, and I don't have the ability to pay and grow my team because it's out of my pocket right now. But I would like to, raise capital so that I can expand it and really take Manhattan Gray, from a small business to a national, international brand.
And do you have your eye on retail at some point when you get this cash flow? Are you thinking beyond direct to consumer?
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to, have a big enough customer base and visibility amongst the marketplace that it would warrant, me
Right.
calling Target, what I'm saying, or calling Ulta and being like, hey, like, would you like to carry Manhattan Ground on your shelf, so that they have the confidence as well that this would sell, right? So I want to be an equitable partner in these conversations once I reach that level.
Yeah, so I know that there are people who in the industry who are VC and angel investors, etc., who listen to this podcast. This might be a good idea to explore. I'm just saying.
Would love to talk to y'all.
Have you also considered like accelerators or any of those kinds of programs?
100%, 100%. I've applied to the Target Accelerator. I've been accepted into the Amazon Black Business Accelerator. So, I'm taking it one step at a time, but I've definitely put my feelers out there, 100%.
That's great. That's great. So let's talk about advice for. Let's talk about somebody aspiring to be a beauty entrepreneur. What advice would you have for someone considering, contemplating, jumping into this space? What do they need to know?
That this is a long-term game. This is not something that you're going to jump into in the first, second, third year and crash out. It is definitely a product building game. It is, cost intensive. Like, there is hard overhead costs associated with this. Like just go into it with the mindset that you're going to dedicate, you know what I'm saying, at least a good like 5 years to this
Right.
idea.
Minimum
That
five
would be my
years. This is not
yeah.
overnight.
Just, nah,
Yeah.
nah, this is not a quick fix. This is like brand building and establishing and testing and customer feedback, and there's so many things that go into it, and finding the right partners and fulfillment partners and manufacturing partners and there's customer service. There's so much that goes into this that I didn't anticipate for, but just know that you're going to be in this seat for a while.
Yeah. So, how do people find Manhattan Gray?
www.manhattangray.com. Manhattan Gray on Instagram, Manhattan Gray on Facebook. Those are the initial places. It's on Amazon. Go to Amazon, Manhattan Gray. It's also on Walmart.com, Manhattan Gray. But yeah, that's where it's at so far.
Okay, well, that's great. That's great.
Mm-hmm,
So, I think that this niche that you're, focusing on, you're like,
mm-hmm.
it is such a welcome thing to have a unisex product designed for textured hair in this, in the space because you're not like a unicorn in there, in that space right now.
I'm happy to be here too. You know what I mean? I think that was the idea. It was to fill a void in the marketplace, and it also was very personal to me. So I felt like all the stars aligned with this particular idea, and I'm excited to pursue it.
Excellent. So, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story. I
Thank
think
you,
it's going to
thank you.
help
I
many.
appreciate you having me. I appreciate it.
That's our show for today. Follow Start Right Here on Instagram at start underscore right underscore here underscore podcast. And check out the Last Word newsletter for my latest musings on beauty and inclusion.